Okay, I think we can get started. Um, Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining this webinar. I hope you're having a great day if you are maybe in Europe, and of course, have a great day if you are in the US. Thank you again for joining this webinar. This is CARTO for developers. We'll be talking about building custom maps and widgets with ease. We'll be doing a few examples, but also making sure that everybody understands how to build these things. I will introduce myself, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware. This webinar is being recorded, so you can access the recording after the session. And you have a pretty useful Q&A section in this webinar where you can put in any question, and I will try to make sure to answer all of them at the end. So let's get started. To introduce myself, and I'll be your host for the next hour, a bit less, hopefully. My name is Alex Tena. I live in Madrid, and I've been at CARTO for a while now. I honestly love it here. Very proud of the team and the work that we're doing. I've been touching and working in many different areas, but most recently I've been focusing on the developer experience and all our APIs and libraries. Of course, some of you might not be the first time that you hear from me. You might have seen me in previous webinars, such as building a scalable cloud-native apps. Other than that, feel free to message me on LinkedIn after this webinar, and I'm always very happy to talk about geospatial data analytics or anything that you really want. So let's get into it, shall we? The agenda for today pretty intense, to be honest with you. I'll try to keep it essentially quick and lively, but we have a lot to cover because we're going to first introduce CARTO and deck.gl as an architecture for geospatial apps with charts, with widgets. Then we're gonna speak briefly about layers and visualizing maps, essentially. I want to make sure that this is the first part and the base because that was covered in previous webinars. So I want to make sure that later we have time for all the new things. Custom charts, widgets, filter, interactivity, and of course, after we have covered all of that, we'll wrap up with examples and resources. That's the agenda for today. And before I get started, I want to adapt a little bit how technical do I get during this webinar. And of course, we'll show a bit of coding and we'll show a bit of theory, but I want to make sure that I understand the technical level of the audience. So pretty simple poll, and also to make sure that there's people at the other side of the screen. I'll give you guys 1 minute to answer, or a bit less. If anybody is answering and thinking, where did I get at? No worries. I'll keep it very high level, and you'll get a lot of takeaways from this session, especially from a product perspective, from a capabilities perspective. You'll understand what's possible and what's not. Results will pop up in just a second. Okay, that's great. We do have a bit of a developer audience. We have a lot of people, friends with JavaScript. So let's adapt it to that. Thank you. So as I said, first we're going to briefly speak about CARTO and deck.gl. We're gonna develop this idea, why we have chosen this architecture and why do we think this is a winning strategy. And you might be familiar with this if you've attended previous webinars, but I love speaking about custom applications and geospatial applications, about this concept where geospatial data needs to be visualized in a map, but even more importantly, it needs to be analyzed. So the visualization alone, while it's great, doesn't take us there. We need the analysis capabilities. And then there are many components, geospatial data, but also non-geospatial data. We have raster data, we have modeling and prediction and spatial data science, we have geocoding tools. And of course, these apps are not isolated. They integrate with other tools, they are developed by other teams, and your teams surely have their preferences in terms of technologies. But we are doing this for a reason, which is we are delivering value for end users and we are delivering value for our company, our organization. We are doing this for a reason, and that reason typically has a profit or a return of investment associated. This is, of course, purely theory, and I named a few technologies and tools that frame this ecosystem in 2025. Um, all the data warehouses are leading the race for data hosting. Of course, there are other players, but here are 5 that we work with. For geospatial, there's Google Earth Engine, and there are a lot of data providers out there that we also need to connect to. And then we have other services, geocoders, traffic providers, and ISO lines. We have Google Maps. We have a lot of things. And more importantly, we'll touch a lot during this webinar, this concept. We want that your teams feel the freedom to use whatever technology they use on their day-to-day. Very important for us. And this is how I feel we should be. This is our positioning. This is my positioning as a product manager of these tools. CARTO and deck.gl are sort of a glue that puts everything together into your custom application, including your development teams. And the idea is that we accelerate your teams and your technology so that you can forget about all of this complexity, focus on the value that your custom applications are delivering to the market or to the customers or to whoever. So this is super important. I know I went a little bit fast, but I want this to be sort of the leitmotif of this webinar. You'll see how this turns into reality in the next minutes. So I wanted to make sure, I don't know if I really needed to do this, but I want to make sure that everybody's familiar with CARTO as well. We have a long history of geospatial technology, but our proudest idea is that we are an end-to-end platform. So not just a product, not just one tool, but a platform for cloud-native geospatial analytics. We offer all of the tools that you see in the screen, all of the products on top of the leading cloud data warehouses. So workflows for spatial analytics builder for that map making. And today we are covering the application side or the developer side of CARTO. The other part, deck.gl. Maybe a lot of you are familiar with deck.gl already, but I wanted to make sure everybody got an intro. Deck.gl was founded sort of 10 years ago. I think it was founded inside Uber as an open source library or as a library for Uber, and then it was made open source later. Nowadays, it's a very healthy open source project. We love it at CARTO. It's part of the OpenGIS Foundation, just like Node. It has many downloads by many teams and developers in the world. And there are 2 things that make it very special. The first is that it has this layered approach for data visualization. So, your map is a set of layers on top of a base map. Pretty standard geospatial, but works great in this case. And since its conception, it was designed to be reactive, super compatible with React and with all of those frameworks. The idea is that you can add interactivity and you can add many different functionalities to your map. Other than that, the other thing I would highlight about deck.gl is that it is probably the most modern and up-to-date geospatial visualization JavaScript library. It has a lot of GPU-powered functionalities, and it's able to handle massive data scales. So, we are very happy that we are sort of contributing and sponsoring this open source library, this JavaScript open source library, because it fits really our needs, and we feel there's a very good synergy and a very good product for the open source geospatial world. So you need to get familiar with deck.gl, and again, I'm calling this stack CARTO plus deck.gl. Feel free to send any questions about deck.gl. Of course, deck.gl is not part of CARTO, but we love to cover and speak about it. I'm going a bit quicker than in other webinars. We have a technical audience as well. So let's jump into this architecture. The architecture in CARTO, again, we have always the data warehouses, and they are the ones powering the computation. Then we have the APIs. Then we have the two libraries, CARTO plus deck.gl. There's a new library called CARTO API Client. You'll see in a minute. And then your application, whatever you want to put on top, your features, your team, anything that you want. Key ideas that you may want to remember from this slide. You will need to use deck.gl, so that's always a must, at least for visualization. If you notice, there's no backend. CARTO is your geospatial backend, and that's a very important concept. Your team does not need to develop a backend, or at least not necessarily. It's completely optional. The APIs are there. The data warehouse takes care of the computing. CARTO and deck.gl work super well together to interact with the CARTO APIs, and all you need to do is provide the functionality that you want. And again, the computing happens in the data warehouse, so nobody has to take the data out. Your security and compliance teams will be very happy. You can scale that, for terabytes of data. I'll be showing actually some data sets that are pretty heavy, and I'm playing with them as if it was nothing, just because I know that our data warehouse is supporting the workload, and I don't have to worry about the user's device, about whether they are on a small laptop or if they don't have enough computing power. It's always the data warehouse that is computing this. The benefits are clear versus traditional JS. This is, of course, a very biased opinion, but I stand strongly behind this, because what I've seen is that, especially on the scalability factor, we are used to building pipelines and creating tile sets and pressing a button, waiting 4 hours, or we've seen extreme examples, right? But waiting 12 days until all of the tile sets have been pre-processed, whether it's ArcGIS or any other traditional GIS tool, and that simply takes away a lot of the flexibility. We believe that the scalability factor that you gain by using CARTO and deck.gl is essentially 100 times. Then there's the security factor and the convenience factor of not having to move your data. For us, that's extremely important. Governance perspective, especially nowadays, nobody wants to be, replicating data into third-party vendors. CARTO takes a lot of pride in not having to replicate your data elsewhere. And lastly, these are the data warehouses that you are already using. You do not need to spin up additional computing resources in most cases. And there are many ways to optimize these warehouses so that, for a terabytes of data, typically you would need to spin up a huge machine and probably incurring a lot of costs. And we've seen many heavy workloads being really cheap on the cloud data warehouses. So pretty opinionated, but this is what we believe in, and this is what we've been working for the past 4 or 5 years. So pretty exciting. And now theory is over, or at least partially over. Let's do little code and examples. Before I do that, I'll introduce each concept and then I'll show an example. So the first concept is visualizing layers. Let's visualize some data. In case anybody is not familiar, we are working with two concepts. One is sources and the other one is layers. Sources describe essentially how you are connecting to CARTO and the way you're connecting to your data. We have sources for every possible data type, so vector data or raster data, but also spatial indexes. And we have a very cool feature called boundaries for polygon-based visualizations. But what you need to understand is that this is how you define what your data looks like and all the data-related properties. This source also incorporates the authentication. And then we have layers. Layers are the visual representation. These are a part of the deck.gl. And you'll see that actually I'm using deck.gl. I'm not using a CARTO library. We have a layer for every type of data, and they are all tile-based layer, which means that you can put 43 million data points, and our tile layer technology will dynamically make sure that your visualization is correct and performant for every zoom level. Let's explore this. So please bear with me while I switch tabs, and I'll do all of that. I want to make sure that everybody's familiar with this repository, and probably I do need to zoom a little bit. So deck.gl examples. We have so many examples here. All of the examples that I'm going to show today, except a few of them, come from this repository. And we are going to start by a very simple one that actually helps us explain a lot of things. After this webinar, when you are, you have blocked some focus time for yourself to go over this, just open these examples and click on this button. You will need to add your own environment file and likely create your own token. But the end result is something like this, where you will have your code in the left side and the example live in the right side. Let me adjust this. As I said, you will need to modify your, if you want to make this work with your own account, you will need to modify this or create this end file. Where do you get these values from? So that will be the first thing that we do. We go to our CARTO workspace and then developers. Actually, before I do that, here's my API-based URL. So first value goes here. And then I want to create a new API access token. I'll talk more about authentication later because we have a bunch of options, but for an example, the simplest way is to create an API access token. So I will assign a name to this token. And this is kind of similar to an API key, but it's limited to a specific resource, to a specific data set, if you want to put it that way. I want to make sure it uses maps and SQL, and I will choose a connection. So I have a lot of them here. And then I can say, hey, this token can access all of this data and or a specific SQL query. So I could do any query here, and of course I could start adding where filters, where clauses. And ultimately, let's do something much more simple. And I could also block this token, but for this webinar, let's just keep it this way. Oops. There we go. And if I copy my token, I go into the environment file and I would replace it. This token is the one I need, so if I replace it, it won't work. But you guys, when you go home when you do your focus time and replicate this example, make sure to replace this one. Once you do it, your code will be ready. Will be importing the right variables. I will dissect a little bit this code, then I'll play around a little bit, and that will make it very interactive. So first of all, let's let's make sure that this is reacting to our inputs. It is. That's awesome. Okay. I'm just doing this to showcase that this is a very standard deck.gl visualization where we create a new deck canvas. The HTML is also super simple. There's the deck canvas here. And this is how we start our deck, essentially, framework. The initial view state, this is where I'm controlling the zoom, the bidding, the pitch. pretty strange, but let's roll with it. And this is the way that I'm adding a map libre base map with a style coming from CARTO. And this is how I'm synchronizing my deck map, my deck layers with the base map below. Cool things that you can do here already without putting any data on top. You can absolutely change this to a Google Maps base map or to any other style. Actually, I should be able to do this. And as you can see, we quickly changed the base map to a different style. Pretty, once you are familiar with this code, you can go extremely quick. Something that I don't have time to show today, but I love is you see how the view state, you can move it and you can play it with it pretty easily. There are transitions and what in deck.gl this is called fly to. So I'll write it here. You could, and this is just deck.gl, this is not yet CARTO, but you could move your camera, the user clicks a button. So it's like, take me to New York. And then you can bring this to New York smoothly and moving the camera while you do it. And if you want to build that sort of a story map experience where the camera in your custom app moves neatly, you can absolutely do that. And it's, it's a pleasure to work with deck.gl. Let's move into the CARTO side. I prepared a little bit here, some selectors because I added some filtering. But then what I'm doing is my source, as we explained. I actually have two, one for the polygons, one for the points. And then layers. So vector tile layer. About the source, when you play with these examples, you'll need to specify the authentication, the API-based URL, and then the only trick that I'm doing here really is this query parameter, which allows me to add some interactivity to the application. But other than that, I'm specifying the SQL query. That's neat. Then let's style a little bit this source. I have two of them. So as you can see here, this one is for, so this one is the polygons and this one is the points, the symbols. deck.gl styling is super simple. As you can see here, I already, you can already understand most of what's happening. I can make my polygons less, have less opacity, and I can modify the domain of my color palette. So let's make the bigger color more, sorry, the darker color more noticeable. So as you can see, we managed to get my visualization a little bit more dark. And, depending on the story that you're telling with your data, you could also make this dynamic. So this would be a variable that you would set up somewhere or a function. I don't need to explain JavaScript to you guys, but I want to start, putting in your mind that this is your code. You can create absolutely everything with it. The other simple concept that I'm doing is I'm doing database styling. So I'm styling the radius of the points by the damage of that accident. And I'm accessing the data of the source and then properties and then total damage. In this case, I'm doing very simple math. I probably should be doing something more sophisticated, like adding a scale to make my points incredibly bigger, or I could select a different property. But this one is perfect. We want to showcase the damage. And then lastly, I just want to make sure that everybody understood that, you can use SQL and that SQL can contain SQL parameters. So let's visualize 2011. And in a minute, well, actually, in a few seconds, we'll have the 2011 data set coming straight from our data warehouse and pretty performant, pretty neat. So this is what a deck.gl visualization with CARTO layers and sources looks like. 100 lines of code. So pretty simple. With CARTO and deck.gl, you can also visualize raster data. So pretty awesome that you can do this surface temperature from Landsat. And the styling is, everything here is pretty similar. Instead of vector source, I'm using a raster source, and then I'm using raster tile layer. And then here, I wanted to keep it simple for this webinar. I'm doing some operations with the bands of this raster. I could, of course, modify these numbers to get a different styling, and takes a little bit of playing around, but you guys know your data. If not, the CARTO Data Explorer is also a great tool to get the values and workflows as well. That's visualization. I don't want to stop a lot here. I want to make sure we have time for everything else. Because what I guess what everybody is here for, or at least that's my opinion, is adding custom charts and widgets. So whether it's a Sankey or a histogram, we'll be able to add it. And this is a new feature. We released this, I believe, October last year. And the idea is that you can add custom scalable charts for absolutely any custom application that uses CARTO on the GL. Key ideas here is that you can use your favorite charting library. CARTO is not telling you how to build your charts. Absolutely, you can use eCharts, D3, Chart.js, or any other charting library. If your team uses React or Angular, that's supported as well. And the examples that I'm going to use actually do have a lot of data, and I want to make sure that you see how performant it is. Last item, but probably the most important, is that these widgets are special because they interact with your map. They stay synchronized, they filter your map, they do all of the heavy lifting. You don't have to do pretty much anything. What's the architecture of a widget? This widget looks pretty simple, but it only has 4 components really. Sources, you already know them. Filters, we'll cover them in a little bit, but essentially think of, where clauses for your data. The data models, which we'll cover in a minute, and then your own UI. You guys decide. We are not telling you to use a design system or anything. You can absolutely change the way your widgets look like. If we combine the two things that we have covered so far, the architecture looks extremely simple. You have the sources that you define in your code. That's the data. Then you define layers, which are added to your deck.gl map. And then you also add CARTO data models. For example, get formula, get histogram. And once you have your data model, you can add your own UI. Enough talking. Let's actually show some examples. Again, I'm covering a lot of things. So something that I want to make sure is that everybody that has a question or that is a bit lost puts a question in the QA section, and I'll make sure to cover that at the end of the session. So let's play around with widgets. I loaded a different example. This one is actually using 1.4 million points of interest in the United States. And again, the idea is that building this takes barely 200 lines of code. It doesn't take a whole development team to actually have something like this. So components of this one, you guys are already familiar with deck. Then I want to make sure that the map filters the widgets. So as you can see here, I'm preparing my view state from deck.gl. The code starts getting a bit more advanced, but nothing problematic for you guys. You'll need to debounce a little bit these requests. This is something that you can absolutely get the idea from our examples. What you don't want is that every time a user moves the map, your widget has to recalculate, you wait a little bit, and then you trigger the operation. So as you can see here, pretty standard. This is how everything is connected. Again, after the session, make sure to read this code, and if you don't understand anything, reach out directly. I'll be very happy to guide you through. How do we build these two widgets, formula widget, category widget? Of course, first of all, I need to make sure that I have an HTML component ready for it, pretty simple. I'm also doing some filtering, and what I want to show you is here I have my data source, same as we saw before. In this case, this is a table. And it is as simple as this. So this is the key part of this code and probably one of the key components of this webinar. Adding a source in CARTO, or sorry, adding a widget in CARTO is as simple as using any of these functions. So get categories, group name. So I'm going to categorize this data set by group name. The operation that I'm going to run on every category is count. And then I'm filtering this widget by the view state. So if I didn't do this, you will see that my widget is not synchronized anymore with the map. It will absolutely show the same regardless of where I am. This is one of the key components of this example, how we focus on siesta key. I was in Siesta Key 2 months ago. That's why I'm swimming here. Lovely place. One of the probably best beaches in the US. And we can see here POIs. We have slightly more than 1,000, and I'm zooming in too much, but you can see how the different categories for the POIs showcase. I can zoom in even further, and our spatial filter is doing all the heavy lifting. This is not difficult to achieve for any developer. You can copy from this example, pretty easy to achieve. Then I talked before about customization. So what I'm doing later, essentially, this is pretty standard e-charts code. So the amount of things and customizations that I could have is unlimited. This is freedom, absolutely freedom for my developers and for my teams. Let's change the color of these bars. Let's try to do something like that. Pretty ugly, actually. Still ugly, but that works. Then, I could add as many e-charge properties. This is absolutely my own code. I don't have any limitations. This is not CARTO, and this is a lot of the flexibility that we want to provide to developers. There's absolutely nothing that is forbidden or that you guys can't do. The result of this is essentially the data. So if we did a console log of categories, this would be, I think in this case, it's actually an array and then pretty much just data. So this is why later we can absolutely do whatever we want with this. Do we want to do it in a bar chart? Great. Do we want to turn this into a, like horizontal, vertical? Do we want to change the axis? Absolutely, we can. There's no problem. There's nothing we can't do once we have made this so independent, the visualization from the data. I will go back to filtering later, but a way to showcase how this is so, flexible is let's add widgets that we haven't seen. essentially that, we haven't ever created with CARTO before because these were not available in our previous libraries. One of them is a Sankey chart. So Sankeys, they are pretty opinionated. You have lovers and haters, just like pie charts. But we made one with CARTO pretty easily. And you know what? This is a 3.6 million data set of city bike trips in Manhattan. And you know what? It actually reacts to the map using the same type of thing. And, if we do some analysis, visual analysis maybe, but still great. We see that in this area of Manhattan, Sunday trips are way lower, and most of them are from this area, of course, the one that we have in the screen. But we can already start seeing all of these patterns. And again, this is not a heavy example. This is roughly 300 lines of code. I even have some tooltips here. So I want to, communicate that this is not essentially a heavy lifting for any developer to pull, and you absolutely can copy these examples. I think I have more examples. So here, what I'm doing is H3 source. If you're not familiar with special indexes, please do get that knowledge either from us or from any other source. H3 and special indexes are a great way to aggregate your data, and we can also do widgets on top of them. For a widget to work with H3, we need to tell the widget and other people how to aggregate the spatial indexes. But once we do that, the code is pretty similar. So we have an H3 query source, and then we have our get. You know what? Actually, let's get that. So get formula. I want to do the sum. I think I could do this is population, so it's gonna be a bit weird, but I could do what is the H3 cell with the, what's the top population for any H3 cell in this visualization. And again, same concept. As I zoom in, we get new data from our widgets. So I hope you're getting the key concepts here. I don't want to make this into a coding session. I actually thought about a lot about it. Happy to do follow-ups with people. But the idea here is that to make these charts, you didn't have to, code any queries or wrap your head around the complex operations that are happening under the hood. CARTO is doing all of this. What else? Let's go back into the slideshow. Now I want to speak about the next step for us. We have a map in our application. We have widgets. Widgets allow you to create custom charts. And we have already seen that when you put the map to play, when you zoom in the map, you can also update your widgets. But let's do more interactivity. Let's do filtering. Adding filters is super easy. I actually learned that, I thought it was pretty obvious, but then I saw people asking questions about it. So I want to make sure that everybody understands today that you don't have to do a lot of things to add filters to your application. You don't have to create additional SQL sources. You don't have to do all of that. CARTO provides all of that functionality as well. Super easy to set up. You will have, I'll show you in a minute, but you have things such as adding filters, clearing all the filters. You can add multiple filters at once. You can apply them to everything in your application, some things only. And as you saw, we can also add filtering by a viewport or filtering by a bounding box. So if we want to, filter the state of Texas, we can absolutely do it with this tool. When you combine everything, the architecture remains pretty simple. This is still high level, and we'll show it in action in a second. You define your sources, then you go into these filtering capabilities, and then you build your widgets, you build your layers, and you get a really powerful application. I spoke about filtering by a geometry. So a geometry can be the bounding box of the application, the viewport, what the user is viewing at that moment. But it can also be a something that they define. So let's think about this. The user goes into my application, draws a circle like 5 kilometers around Nashville, a perfect circle. We can pass that to our widgets, pass that everywhere, and even create custom shapes, send them as a spatial filter, and we could even trigger a whole prediction model starting from that geometry as a parameter. So that's a very common question that I get. Can we use these sort of user-defined polygons as initial starters for our application? And the answer is absolutely yes. Actually, if something that I'm transparent about is that our builder tool uses the same technologies as our developers. So the video that I'm showing here is actually from builder, but the same capabilities are available for developers in this repository, which is called deck.gl community editable layers. Our team will be super happy to guide you through this one. And I actually am working on providing examples for this too in the future. Let's show you some of that filtering capabilities. So if we go back to our example, we are able to style all of these things, but we want to filter them. And filter means that whenever somebody triggers this category filter, which in this case I have this function triggered in a few places, I'm gonna do a few things. I know that I need to start loading, so of course I will retrieve new data. If I send the all category, I clear filters, no filters applied. But if I'm actually receiving a filter, here's what I do. I add a filter. The column for the filtering will be group name, type in, and values, whatever value I'm sending. So just to help you understand a little bit better, this is typically like my category. In this case, it's gonna be tourism. Actually, I need to trigger the function. So right now, no matter what I send, it should return tourism. As you can see, that's what we got. Let's make this dynamic. Let's keep it as category. So what is happening under the hood is the filter is being sent from this dropdown. The event is being passed through this function to filters, and then filters are applied to the source. As easy as that. I know it's our own way of adding filters, and you will find all the reference for this in the documentation. There are different types. So if I wanted to do some sort of, I don't remember by memory, but I think it's something like that. Close open, and then this could be two numbers like 0 and 30. So if this was a numerical data source or a numerical column, so something like risk index, then this would be filtering from 0 close to 30 and more. So pretty flexible. And again, the magic is that you can absolutely link these things in whatever way you want. Again, the idea is that you do this sort of, oh, sorry, I'm passing the wrong one. So simple to filter. Let's choose a different category. 1.4 millions of data, and you're seeing, under 1 second response times for any analysis. If we go back to let's go back to just a key here. we can start playing around. This is already a more complex app than just a simple map. This is telling us analytics and this is telling us value for our end users. More things. Let's reset this. And maybe some of you are already thinking about this, but what if every time you click on a category, you also trigger this filtering? So that's exactly what I'm doing here. And if you can see, I click on others. Taking a little bit more than usual. Oops, demo effect, but I did this a few minutes ago and it did work. Let's try again, just in case. Well, my bad on this one. I have this other example where the same thing happens. So let's click here. Same concept. We click on a category on this widget, and all of a sudden it shows only cells with this one. In this case, I'm doing something pretty awesome, which is, hey, I don't want to filter everything. I only want to filter, the map and the formula. I don't want to filter my chart. That is a technique that is also available with CARTO. Pretty simple to achieve. What else? I of course wanted to make sure that you guys understood what was the buzz about the drawing filters. So there you go. That's all the cell towers in this area or in Madrid. Even better. The same technology, you have it available for developers. So pretty cool. You see the widgets right here. Last things, let's wrap up. There are examples and resources that you can use. Again, I talked about the example repository that we have available in our website. And I want to also introduce this repository, which is called CARTO app templates. So on CARTO app templates, you will find templates that already work for React, Vue, and Angular. They contain the things that I've showed today. They contain layers, they contain widgets, they contain filters. Actually, I have one of them deployed. This is a Vue application, completely functional, actually pretty beautiful, the visualization. This is, again, the same data set, 43 million cell towers that I can absolutely just play around, filter. It goes extremely quick, and I can filter by category, by just clicking on my visualization. So this is actually a heavy data set. You can do different techniques to not do the massive visualization that I'm doing, maybe not the best practice, but for the sake of this template, we wanted to give you this tool that, if you want to start your own React, Angular, or Vue application from this template, please absolutely do be my guest. We'll be happy to show you around. Let's clear these filters and let's move on. If you already know how to build these applications and you want to roll them to the public, you'll need to deploy them very easily, JavaScript application or Angular application. You might need to protect it because these are internal applications. There are different strategies. I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but API access tokens, that's the most simple. That's what we use today. You can also protect your application with a login with CARTO. That's what we call SPA, single page application or auth client. If needed, that could be your own single sign-on. So pretty flexible and a lot of options. And lastly, if you were doing something more complicated where CARTO was integrated somewhere else, or you wanted to scale things to an insane amount of features, there's a backend to backend authentication system too, which is pretty ideal to integrate CARTO elsewhere. Our documentation covers these three strategies, so pretty easy for anyone that is thinking about building new applications to roll them to hundreds of users and thousands of users. And that's it from me. I just want to say thank you so much for listening. I know it was 50 minutes of me talking nonstop and showing code and maps. I hope you like the features that you saw. I hope you like the strategy that we are following for developers. We are trying to break this GIS data silo where data is contained in a different database. We want to be just doing the same techniques that all the other data analysts and developers are doing. You saw the scale of the data that I used in my demo. I'm not I'm not afraid of pulling 43 millions of data points. And if any of that is interesting for you, if you saw those widgets and you want to do them yourself, use those examples. But even better, get in touch. We'll be super happy to guide you around, and I'll spend the remaining minutes answering questions. Again, thank you so much. My pleasure to have you all here. I know it's a bit dense and intense for this time of day. Okay, we have a bunch of questions. I'll go in order, and I think I have time to cover all of them. So I'll put them here. Which service is the best for CARTO? And then it mentions Databricks, Google Cloud, Azure, or Snowflake. We have no preference. We have chosen those four plus, well, we also have Redshift and PostgreSQL. We have no preference. The idea is that your team is already thinking or using any of them. Maybe your team already has a data strategy, and you're maybe working already with TCP or with AWS. The idea is CARTO jumps and piggybacks and integrates into your flow. We don't want you to do more work than needed. Good question, because we actually are proud of that. Someone is asking, oh yeah, so I use SQL, and if you wanted, you don't need to use SQL. There are ways to essentially make reference to that SQL, and let me show you something here to answer that question. We developed this thing called named sources, so you can decide if you want to expose your SQL or not. So the question was, I don't want my SQL to be exposed in the application, and actually we have this feature very recently to hide the SQL from your front-end application. Let me pull more questions. Okay, is JavaScript the only API? Yes, at the moment, deck.gl and CARTO perform and are designed to work with JavaScript. However, the APIs are REST APIs. You can call them from anywhere. So if you just wanted to do like a very simple, SQL query, or you wanted to import a file, you can absolutely do that from Python or from any other language that interacts with our APIs. deck.gl has a few Python bindings as well. So if you wanted to explore Python and Deck, you can, absolutely. My recommendation is CARTO and deck.gl are designed to work with JavaScript. Oh, someone is asking about the env variables. Go into the, I don't know if we can, yeah, I'm actually going to paste something in the chat, paste the URL for the repository. 1 second. So to everyone, if you go into the GitHub that I just linked, and if you go into these examples, you will see the env file there. You only need to add that into your example or create your own. Actually, that would be better. But if you want to work with the same env files that I did, you absolutely can. Does the get categories method call the database directly or the catch styles? So actually, that's something I probably should have mentioned. All of those widgets are hitting the database and are powered by the data warehouse. So that's why we can absolutely pull 43 million rows, and we can get 100% precision on our widgets. So you saw that cell tower example, which probably I can show again. You saw this example, And you saw how I'm able to filter at any point. I can zoom out again, and this is taking just a little bit, and then it's showing the perfect accurate number. This is because the database, the data warehouse, is the one doing the computing. If my device, if my laptop had to do this while running a webinar, I think we we might have faced a few issues. So yeah, the get categories method, all of those widgets are being calculated live by the database. Then someone noticed that it's true that you need to set up the end variables in order for the examples to load. That's actually an issue with this provider that I'm using, StackBlitz. I've filled a report, and if they don't fix it, I will add a disclaimer there for all of you. Um, Sorry if that's a bit of a stone on the road. It should be easy to fix. But yeah, good suggestion. I will definitely add a disclaimer there. Someone asked about filters for raster. So like this, if you want to do a widget like average temperature in Prague, you will be able to in a few weeks. That's a product release that I'm planning to do. That's a great question. Stay tuned. Widgets for raster are not yet available, but they will be available hopefully quite soon. Maybe more around February or March. So good question. Next question, does CARTO developer support Gen AI? Absolutely, absolutely. Especially because we are using pretty standard features from Deck and MapLibre and you know, OpenAI and all of these providers are training as well on deck.gl. So go ahead, use Cursor if you haven't already. It's a great tool. I do believe that if you ask Cursor, add a new um, layer from the CARTO module, it will get the right answer. This is pretty standard JavaScript code. It's not doing anything that would be considered esoteric for an AI not to get. And is evolving incredibly quick. I personally have used Gen AI for parts of these examples. So please do be, be my guest. And we add filters that depend on other filters. Let me understand that question. Can we add filters that depend on other filters? So for example, we have the filters here. I want to show that this is just a JavaScript object. So you can play with this object as much as you want. You can have filters. You can have many filters for the same column for different columns. You can have your filters react dynamically, and you can add whatever JavaScript logic that you want. I'm guessing you have a particular example in mind. If you want, send me a LinkedIn message, and maybe we can go over that particular example. I don't want to, over answer without knowing that one. But in theory, this is an object that you control. So if you want to add logic, you absolutely can. Does CARTO developer support Gen AI with Databricks in particular? Please follow up because I want to understand what's your idea there for AI on Databricks. My take is that we are using SQL on these examples and it's being computed by Databricks. So, any function that you have available on Databricks, you will be able to run that via CARTO. We actually run workflows that are powered by models in Databricks and in Snowflake. So if you wanted to bring that into your application, you absolutely can. We would love to see that actually live. And few last questions. How do we contact CARTO for support? I do believe the best way is to email our support team. Maybe we can actually link this right here. I think that's the best way. Either way, if you reach out to them and it's a good question for me, they'll send that to me as well. So that's surely a good way too. Then someone has tried already CARTO app templates and It's saying that map library dependencies or map library libraries are not loading. Let's do that after this webinar. Let's do that via support, and we'll help you. We'll review that case. I ran this myself a few minutes ago. So unless maybe one of these commits is doing something that it shouldn't, I'll make sure that it's fixed or that it's clear. I'll be super happy to help you. And last question, I'm talking a lot. I should drink some water. Thank you all for staying. How does CARTO costs work for these kind of applications? Is there a trial or a freemium? Trials, absolutely. Please be my guest to open a 14-day trial. It's free. During that trial, you can ask absolutely any question. And during the trial, you can develop applications. You can test this. Then freemium, I think it's, please engage with our team, get a quote. Let's see if we can work together. But please do test, and even if you're on a trial, I will gladly listen to your feedback after this webinar. That was it. Thank you so much for listening. A lot of questions, so I'm guessing that you will have a good time, or at least that you learned something. I hope you are as excited as me about the future of geospatial app development. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.